forgot what I was doing. Okay.
There's a big committee, so please acknowledge all the other members that help set this up. Let me start by saying it's wonderful to see everybody here, and I know that Doug touched so many lives and had such a broad array of friends, and throughout periods of my life I met various people. I don't know most of you, admittedly, and you don't know me, but it's really special for us to see everybody here. We know that this is what Doug would want. Doug loved all of his friends and family and extended family and connections he made all over the world and all over Davis, and Doug touched so many people, so this would be a very happy event for him. So just wanted to thank you all for coming over on a holiday weekend and just making this a special event for Doug. This is exactly what he would have wanted. So I just want to say a couple of things, and then I want to pass it along to others, and then we're going to eat a lovely meal that Doug wanted, and we're all going to enjoy. So just a couple of things. So Doug was my uncle, obviously. He, as we all know here, Doug was such a unique person, and I remember from being a little kid, he was the cool uncle that was funny. He taught my friends about gourds and playing banjos and ukuleles, and you know, he even, I think, slipped a couple of my high school friends some marijuana at one point in time, which probably won't shock anybody, but much later in my life I found that, like, oh God, let's go see your Uncle Doug again, and I never knew why, but found that out later. But we had a great relationship. Doug, as all of you know, appreciated very kind of innate, just simple things, and one of the things I remember when I was in like 3rd or 4th grade, I listened to AC/DC, you know, hard rock band, and Doug would want to come into my room and like rock out, and we'd like turn the music on really loud, and he'd be dancing, and we'd be just jumping around the room, and he thought that was the funnest thing in the world. He had such a, as all of you know, just such a free spirit and fun heart, and I just remember as a kid having a lot of fun memories. One of the things I learned later, which Arden and I were just catching up on, when Doug would visit us, he took me on a bike ride. We had this, I think he borrowed my dad's 10-speed bike, and there's a little seat on the front, and I was probably, I don't know, 4 years old. He told me this story as I got older. We were riding along a country road, and we saw a dead magpie in the road, and you know, I was really concerned. We stopped, and Doug had asked me, "Hey, what happened?" And I said, I couldn't say my R's, but I said, "That bud didn't look both ways." And Doug reminded me of that my whole life, and I still remember the you know, some of those moments with Doug. He was a caring, free-spirited person, and anyway, seeing everybody here, this is what he would have wanted, and it's just wonderful to have everybody. So thank you. I'd like to bring up Doug's sister, my mother, Terry, to say a few things.
Well, I have written my talk because I'm not as good as Mark is at ad-libbing. I'm really glad that you're all here today. Doug told us he wanted a big party, and he got what he asked for. He appointed Vic and Mary and Arden and Ruth as the party planners, and I guess I'm an ex officio member because it's at my house. Is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Doug's hospice nurse, Karen, told me one day that she'd never had a client that was loved by so many people of such diverse background. And what a compliment. Most of the elders in our family lived to be well into their 90s. Doug was strong and vigorous, and I just always thought he'd live a long and healthy life. But right in the middle of my husband's treatment for cancer, I got a call from Doug telling me he'd already had surgery and radiation and was about to undergo chemo. He waited a long time to tell me, but what a blow. He was younger than me. I was supposed to go first. Doug made the most of the time he had left. He had many gatherings where he fixed his famous paella over an open fire in his backyard that was always delicious. And not only was it delicious, the company was always stimulating, and there was such camaraderie, and it was so convivial. When he cooked at my house, my kitchen always looked like a hurricane hit. And I tried to tell myself, look, oh yeah, it won't take long, you just clean it up. And he'd get aggravated with me because he always had something he wanted, or we had something we wanted to watch on TV after we ate. But I always said we had to tidy up the kitchen first before we got to watch TV, and that sort of frustrated him. When we'd all have dinner together and my grandchildren would go to clear the table, they could always tell where Doug sat because there was a circle of food on his plate. One of my memories from years ago was at a Thanksgiving dinner that we hosted. And Ned decided it would be a good time to try making Lebanese flatbread. And I was not too happy about it. And Doug reminded me of that fairly recently before he died. We had a conversation about how furious I was. And maybe it was, I don't remember that so much. Doug had unique interests, even as a child. He collected butterflies from a very young age. Some of his collection is out on the porch. Our mom took us camping one year to Yosemite when Doug was about 10 years old. We were walking up to Vernal Falls. The trail was steep. There was no border between the trail and the cliff. And Doug had his butterfly net, and he saw a butterfly. So he ran towards the butterfly off the trail and started down the steep hill. There was a person also hiking who pulled Doug to safety, and fortunately it didn't end catastrophically. But Jan, who is here somewhere, painted a beautiful picture of Doug being saved by the guardian angel that pulled him out of the chasm. So I don't know, Jan's here somewhere, but the picture is in on the porch. I was very protective of Doug, and I have a memory from when Doug was 8 or 9. He was in our backyard on the backyard swing, swinging, pretending he was Peter Pan and he could fly. So he flew out of the swing and landed and broke his arm. His arm was crooked and really misshapen, and according to our mom, I was hysterical and much more a problem than Doug was. He was of great comfort to me after my husband Jay died. We had dinner at least once a week. We'd watch The Crown together, and one or the other of us usually fell asleep. Doug gave Victoria and I, Spanish lessons. He was a great teacher. He had a plan each week, and we had an assignment. We had to write an essay about almost anything. He was helpful and encouraging. And he was actually surprised and impressed about how much I remembered from college Spanish, which was a huge compliment to me. I mean, to be complimented by, about something intellectual by Doug was just as good as it got. He loved his garden. One of my favorite images of him that will last me my lifetime is going over to his house, walking into the backyard and seeing him on a wooden stool that's in the screen porch, sitting there tenderly cultivating his plants and pulling weeds. I actually have a chili plant of his, one of those rare chilies that I have, and I will make sure that it thrives. Actually, the nurseryman in town wants me to, harvest seeds because it's a rare chili. The most amazing and awe-inspiring thing about my brother was his intellect and his memory. He knew so much in so much detail about so many things. He could give erudite lectures, and often did, on many subjects. I think he spoke, it seems like I asked him, and he spoke pretty fluently about 9 languages, and then knew a smattering of others. Not only did he speak the languages, he knew the history of the country and, everywhere he went. I remember a trip that Jay and I went on to Greece and Turkey. Doug was really aggravated and astounded at me that I hadn't read one of his favorite books, The Ornament of the World. I apologized and told him that I was sure I would enjoy my trip anyway. During the last week of his life, he got weaker and weaker. One day, I crawled upon his bed, told him he was a great brother, and I'd miss him. And he thought for a minute, and he said, "I'll miss you too." The next day, I went over, and I think it was the last time I talked to him, and he was whispering something that I couldn't hear. And I finally got down on his bed and put my head next to his face, and he said, "Butter lettuce." I have no idea why or what it meant, but those were the last words he said to me. Doug, I miss you, and I think of you every day.
Arden.
Hi there, everyone. It's really nice to see so many people coming out for Doug. And towards the end of his life, we spoke a lot about this day. And as you know, he put a number of managerial women in charge of it. Wanted to make sure that it was going to come off well. I think we could say, yeah, here we are. So thanks to Terry and to Vic and to Mary and to Lucero and Veronica and Ruth for all your work. It was really, as Doug would say, like a Swiss machine, just putting this together. And Keith and Craig and, you guys have done a wonderful job also taking care of the music part, which we're going to enjoy later. And thanks to all of you for braving the crowds. I know that it's awkward for some people to be here. It's odd to be in the company of so many people. So instead of spending my time here talking about the profound influence that Doug has had on my life, or about his brilliant art, or his preternatural lingual abilities, or his musical prowess, or his engaging, irascible, dark, convivial, depressed, yet brightly alive person that he was, I thought I'd chronicle some of the major events in his life that made him who he was. And despite knowing him for over 45 years, I've had some difficulty cobbling together a timeline. And it turns out that without a life partner, or a spouse, or a child to remember the details, a life might slip away. And what is here is merely a scaffold, and I hope to learn more details as we talk together this evening. We know that Doug was born in 1947, and he grew up in Sacramento. He was a quiet child, not particularly sociable, but avidly interested in flying things, gliders and paper airplanes, and of course the butterflies that he chased in the natural areas that were still undeveloped behind their backyard. Doug was quiet, preferring his own company, happy to be exploring and writing in his nature journals. His mother played piano, laying a musical foundation that we must acknowledge served him later. As Doug got older, he talked more and more about his summer trips to his ancestral lands in Alturas in Modoc County. About the time he spent there as a young boy with his grandmother, who told him about the native Modoc tribes that came out of the Warner Mountains to trade their reed baskets for old clothes. Later, he made annual trips there with his father and his uncle, whose ashes now rest at that old home site under grand cottonwood trees planted by his grandmother. He attended the Arden Elementary School. We thought that was kind of weird. Then El Camino High School, and then, of course, UC Davis. It was during that time at UC Davis that Doug began the struggle that molded him into the multidimensional person that we know. He was a good student studying something hard like biochem. Again, a detail that may be lost. He was homeless his senior year of school, drifting from couch to couch, in florid anguish, trying to figure out who he was and where he fit into this world. He dropped out of UC Davis with just a handful of credits. Imagine that, all that work to be a biochem or whatever the hell it was. And in just a few credits, he dropped out. He was, at that time, unkempt and homeless and angry and deeply unhappy. And he was later able to describe that feeling of utter desolation as he called himself a bushman. And I'm sure the solution to enlist in the Army after not graduating from college, made sense to him, but it was a bit of a head scratcher for his friends and family. Perhaps it was a lifeboat upon which to cling. He found himself at Fort Benning in Georgia, basic training, where they shouted and called him a maggot. Didn't like his attitude, but he mostly put up with the daily grind of Army training. One thing about this experience that stayed with him right up to the very end, the last years of his life, he remained slim and lithe and flexible. He lived firmly in his body and loved to use it. Not surprisingly, Doug did not quite finish basic training. He was discharged, and Terry and I believe it was honorably, although the details are murky and again lost in the sands of time. A defining experience in Doug's life was his sojourn to Belize to visit his friends Pete and Rhonda, mysterious Pete and Rhonda, who are here tonight. I love to hear stories of his life there. Pete and Rhonda had carved out a home in the bush. They lived off the land. They became close with a community of Creoles. They grew their food, they built their house, and they weathered tarantulas in the roof and biting gnats called hehen. It was a deep and exhilarating experience for Doug, and it informed much of the rest of his life. The sheer realness of Belize stayed with him for the next 50 years. He had an uncompromising ability to live the life he believed in. You young uns will certainly remember Buitabe Badabagoo, which he taught all of us as a Creole goodnight. 6 months or so in Belize, and back to Davis, white bread, middle America, bland and flat Davis, which Doug reviled, yet could never figure out how to leave. His habitat was the Central Valley, and as much as he wanted to leave, he really was not able to. He traveled Central America, Mexico, Spain, Nepal, India, Zimbabwe. He spent summers in San Francisco, always spoke of leaving Davis, but could never reach escape velocity. He sang praises of that Central American country and tried to adapt to his America that was changing so rapidly. Reagan, trickle-down economics, shopping malls, parking lots, McDonald's and Taco Bell, highway traffic, drought. It was a bitter and angry transition as Doug struggled to find his place, which he did soon enough as the chef of the UC Davis Coffee House. This new position was a godsend for Doug. He was able to refine and experiment with foods and spices from around the world, from eggplant, tapenade to falafel. The coffee house was soon known for its experimental, if temperamental, chef who put out some pretty good food for white bread, bland Davis. I met Doug there as a new employee when I was 19, and we hit it off from the beginning. He was then living in an impossibly dank, tiny cabin at Slater's Court, but soon moved into a light-filled bungalow at Clory Court on Olive Drive. I think this was when that black cloud in Doug's head began to break up a little bit. He was more sociable, he had a great cadre of friends, some wonderful neighbors, and that internal struggle that paralyzed Doug continued to loosen its grip. Well, after the drama of the demise of the coffee house, or everything that was meaningful about it, Doug left cooking for another great love, books. He worked at Ag Access and then at Bogey's Books in town. ever irascible, but incredibly knowledgeable, good at customer service, if he liked you, but tough on his bosses. Calori Court where he was living was demolished. You can't stop progress. I think they're just finishing the apartment buildings now, about 30 years later. Whatever. Anyway, Doug relocated to his house on Simmons Way, a lovely stucco bungalow that seemed impossibly large when he moved in, and yet impossibly tiny when filled with all his Doug-obelia. He recreated his perfect garden, old fennel stalks roped together, islands of kale and greens awash in wildflowers. He became a fixture of the farmer's market, working for a small farm in the Central Valley. He could talk produce varieties, recipes, in the many languages of all the clients. "Hey, Doug, why don't you go back to UC and finish your degree?" urged his friend, life coach, organizer, travel agent, Mary. So he dusted off his credits with the university and found out that he could get it done in about a year and could take some fascinating classes, entomology, physics, ornithology. And as we were cleaning up Doug's files, I found some coursework binders with exams and professor comments that were blindingly complimentary, such as, "Doug, people like you are the reason I teach." And, "Doug, you are an inspiration to all of the students of this class and to me." Of course he was. His last 20 years or so on Simmons Way were, in my mind, the most settled and peaceful years of his life. Perhaps because he was older now, used to being alone. Although loneliness was a lifetime and pervasive struggle for Doug. It was here in the Simmons neighborhood that Doug found his family, conveniently next door and across the street. Lucero, Veronica, and Javier, and their families. God could not have engineered a happier accommodation for Doug. A vibrant, fun-loving, Spanish-speaking, Mexican-cooking, crazy, loud, complicated, rabble-rousing family group, which welcomed Doug into their lives in a warm, steamy, moss-scented embrace. Doug was brave in the face of death. He set an example of resolve and steadfastness as the miseries of his illness began to plague him. I think he understood how much he was loved when our friends banded together to provide food and company during his treatments. It honestly surprised him. Doug was my friend, my mentor. He was a member of our family and deeply loved by my husband and sons. He had a teeny tiny crush on my brother Will, whom he got to know over the years. My sister Kate lived with him at the house at Simmons as she pursued her doctorate in genetics. A more ascetic household may never exist. My mother, not a particularly easy person, had deep regard for Doug and the subtle way he molded and shaped each of us. At once engaging and infuriating, kind, loving, sarcastic, biting, angry, and convivial, sage and silly, fixated on unfulfilled longings, like love. But at the end, I think he understood that he was loved by so many. I see him in my mind's eye, crouched on a tropical riverbank, cool water flowing over sculpted rocks, sunlight filtering through the jungle foliage. Around him a cloud of butterflies, swallowtails, giant blue morphos, patterned heliaconids, sulfurs, wide-eyed in wonder, fulfilled and content, and at peace, having lived his life the way he wanted to live it.
Thank you so much, Arden. That was, gosh, I'm sitting there absorbing all of this. I knew bits and pieces of that, but threading that all together was really amazing. And I just want to say, I know we met Arden, we interacted at some point when I was younger, but I heard about Arden through Doug his entire life, and I know the friendship and that relationship was so deep and so special to Doug. And two things as Arden was talking that I remember as Doug was kind of going through the later stages of his life. One was which just demonstrated the depth of that friendship and how special you were to each other. We came to visit Mom, gosh, probably 2 months before Doug died, and I had one of the kids with me, and we were up here for a night or so, and we wanted to have Doug over for dinner. So Arden was visiting Doug, and Arden brought Doug over and spent an hour with him, bathing him and comforting him and getting him ready for dinner. And it was a very, very special night, and it demonstrated how caring you were for Doug, and that I saw that very special. And the second was when we were, it was the point in time where Doug needed to move his 30-year-old homemade wooden slat bed with a mattress out of his room, and a hospital bed was coming in, and Arden was, running point on getting Doug's house organized, and we were moving, wooden frames and things around, and Arden was there to make sure Doug talking through what was happening, and it was a very special, embodiment of what you meant to him and what he meant to you. So, thank you. I'd like to invite Daniel Cepero Herrera up, please.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I have to apologize for my English, a little sketchy. Sometimes, so I had to write my my speech, which was a very difficult thing to do, because I mean, I could speak for ages about Doug, and I really appreciate, like, how what everybody's saying is complementing everybody else's speeches or things to do, and I'm honored to be here, especially because I think that and getting to know all of you is like enhancing and enlarging my understanding of who Doug was, who I think he went too early for me, because I only could be with him for 13 years, and I have the sensation that it was like too early for him to go, because I had so much to experience with him still. And now I will read what I wrote, which is just a little thing about what I've been feeling these last few days. As I arrived to this area, we live in Southern California, I have been thinking about Doug all the time. I think of him every day, actually, but these days even more, of course. We just went to his house a few hours ago, and it was too much. Last week, I brought my son Julio to the Puta Creek River. He was throwing stones at the water, and for a while I stayed under the shade of a bush, surrounded by blackberry flowers and a lot of bees. I looked at the sky and felt calm and totally happy for a few seconds. This happened for the first time in a very long time. Then I went back to my thinking of Doug, and I watched the bees and the plants and the beauty of nature surrounding me, and started to mentally hold a conversation with him, as I do many times. Then a huge menacing dog appeared and made this poetic scene totally ruined, so I will skip that little episode. He tried to eat my son. I was talking about bees. When I first arrived to Davis 13 years ago, I had lived all my life in big cities. I was from Madrid. I was totally ignorant when it comes to names of plants, or even the most basic processes of nature. I didn't even know that a fruit emerged from a flower. It was a beautiful discovery, a little embarrassing, I must say, but it was beautiful. My only approach to nature by then had taken place through poetry and art. I admired the mystics like Saint John, Fray Luis de Leon, and other poets like Garcilaso, Federico García Lorca, or my very much admired Walt Whitman. When I met Doug at the Delta of Venus, he had precisely a book by Federico García Lorca under his arm, And that book became the bridge that linked us forever. I first connected with Doug through poetry, art, and culture. He admired the Spanish culture and had an incredible knowledge that made me learn a lot of things about my own language and my own country. I confess, his command of Spanish made me look up some words I didn't know myself in the dictionary. We became friends, and Doug taught me in his garden everything I know about nature. Real nature, the one that's not in the books. He would laugh at me because I was afraid of bees and any other animal, especially insects and bees. Thanks to him, thanks to all the many years we've been together, poetry, art, nature, love, and friendship became all one and all the same thing. His companionship meant for me a unique sort of completeness. I have never felt more myself than in the times I have shared with him, alone, having a coffee or cooking, or surrounded by friends celebrating friendship around the fire, dancing, singing, playing banjo, laughing, talking about poetry, nature, love, politics, sometimes, well, many times, languages, craftsmanships, coins, drugs, customs, travels, cooking, spices, planes, parents, couples, sex, God, leaf-blowing machines, blues, flamenco, banjos, Cajun culture, Native American culture, maps, booze, messaging, tomatoes, comales, metates, molcajetes, masks, rats, rainbows, vultures, rockets, dancing. Our last conversation was about dancing. Birds, of course, and many, many other things, but I remember we talked a few times too about bees. I am right now, when I was writing this, I was dictating my phone. I was dictating these words to my phone while my kid was playing at the river. And I stayed watching him, not hiding my tears, surrounded by a bush full of blackberry flowers and full of bees. And I am not afraid of bees. I was not afraid of bees. I'm not afraid of bees anymore. Thanks to Doug, I am not afraid of bees. I'm happy right now, at the moment when I was dictating this. I was happy staring at the blue sky, thanks to Doug. I feel Doug in the shade of candles in the light. I feel him in the bees. I imagined he was saying hi playfully, like he would always do. He always would. I feel him all the time. I said before that I admired Walt Whitman. His poetry helped me cheer up when I was very young and I wanted to die after my heart had been broken several times. I would like to read a few lines that helped me for that purpose many years ago, and I think they are appropriate for this moment too. It says, "The smallest sprouts show there is really no death, and if ever there was, it led forward life and does not wait at the end to arrest it, and seize the moment life appeared. All goes onward and outward, and nothing collapses. And to die is different from what anyone supposed, and luckier."
Thank you very much, Daniel. Emily.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So, okay. Uncle Doug was the type of person to intrigue you with his endless knowledge of culture, language, and everything nature, which, are classy conversation topics, but he was also the type of person to not have a single care in the world when it came to manners in social situations. So these are actually quite recent memories, and one of the most recent as well as the most memorable things about him was when my friend Cassie and we came here to spend the night with my Nana, like hang out, have dinner and all that. And Uncle Doug came for dinner as he usually does, and I remember we had chips and salsa out on the table. And, you know, mid-conversation, salsa falls out of his mouth all over the table. Cassie and I just started dying of laughter, and Uncle Doug just carries on. Just, you know, typical Uncle Doug. So, thought I'd share that. And then another memory that happens, it's actually, like, was a weekly occurrence, is that at our dinner table inside, you know, it would be Uncle Doug on one end, my mom right next to him, and as my Nana said, you know, every dinner there'd be a radius of food around his plate when he finished. But I remember one night he was eating, and he, you know, and then my mom, you know, makes the most obvious, just away from him. My mom's Tracy, by the way. And, you know, Uncle Doug, and then my mom is just staring at him in disgust and like, oh my God, can you stop? And that, it just was so funny because he was just one of the most carefree people I ever met. So. Okay, and then another funny memory that I thought I'd share is I have, I don't know how to say it. I have a bias against Priuses. I do not like Priuses. And so anyway, Uncle Doug got a Prius in the last, I think, couple years of his life. And my family and I were driving here for lunch one day, and a Prius blew through a stop sign, pissed my mom off. My mom was like, that goddamn idiot, oh my God, could have killed us. And then we get to my Nana's house, and it's Uncle Doug's Prius that blew through a stop sign. All right. But, you know, to get sentimental, he offered me a lot of perspective to the world that I have never thought of before. I remember we have a group chat with him and my Nana, and he one day sent a picture of a leaf that had like yellow stripes through it and said how they reminded him of lightning bolts. And, you know, a lot of people wouldn't realize that, but Uncle Doug was, and I think that's important. There's a lot more to life than meets the eye. His simplistic and carefree way of living, despite being overly carefree, is I think he had about 40 bikes stolen from his garage just from leaving it open all the time. That just showed to me that there's more to life than, you know, all the materialistic things, and I think that's something that should be learned from Uncle Doug. He had a beautiful, intelligent soul, and he left a mark on each of us, and he will never be forgotten. I love him very much and everything that he's taught me, and thank you for the opportunity of letting me speak tonight.
Sorry, but that was Arden's Prius that went to Doug. So she upgraded to a Tesla, so nice work. Quinn Morgan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Quinn. I'm Mary and Bob's son. So, as many of you, Doug was an honorary member of our family. Some of my earliest memories of Doug were him helping me make, as I called them, hangabos on my play stove at the time. Likewise, he never let me forget that as well. Some of my favorite Christmas memories were, you know, of him teaching me how to properly twirl a puddle jumper, as well as him making his wonderful huevos rancheros. I'm not sure that I will ever be able to replicate that salsa, but I can promise you I will spend my life trying. Doug has made an enormous impact on who I am today, and I think about him often. I think about him whenever I see a beautiful stamp. I see him every time I see a wonderful piece of art or a witty political cartoon. I think about him when I turn off the water to save save water as I'm brushing my teeth. I think about him every time I guiltfully pull a bottle cap out of the trash can that I have mindlessly thrown away. I think about him as I wander among the anise plants in our backyard and see the anise swallowtail caterpillars that we find on them. I especially think about Doug then. The magic of the natural world has always really enchanted me, and Doug and I shared that. Not just as a young boy chasing butterflies and catching frogs in his backyard on Olive Drive, but throughout my life. I think that really was a huge part of what made Doug so special. He could see the hidden beauty in things, whether it was nature or cooking or art or music, and he would share in that experience with the other people that could see that magic too. Excuse me. I can't help but think that the world is just a bit less magical without Doug in it. And yet, I also think that he has left the world a far more magical place for so many of us. So Doug, thank you for the moments you shared with us. Thank you for everything that you taught us. And most of all, thank you for being a part of all of our families. Thank you.
Thank you, Quinn. Pete Dutton.
It's like a long, slow walk.
Well, it's been really nice to hear what you guys have had to say. I want to say one thing. When Doug got back from Fort Benning, he gave me a pair of his boots, and I wore those boots for years. So, yeah, I knew Doug from 1965. We were two of the worst students at UC Davis. But another thing, you know, I talked to Terry, called us, you know, because I hadn't seen Doug for 30 years. And so Arden wrote us, you know, I didn't know Doug was sick, because, I mean, we used to write letters we never emailed, because his letters were such a treasure to get, you know, we illustrated them and everything, and so we never emailed him. So, I mean, I knew he was sick, but I didn't know what happened. And then Arden wrote me and said Doug had died, but she didn't put any kind of address on, so we just didn't know, you know. I tried to find her, but I'm really bad on those things, you know, so I just fucking gave up, you know. So it was so nice. Terry called us, so I started asking her questions about Doug, and this has to do with the Prius. And my first question was, did Doug ever have a driver's license? You mean he had a car? 'Cause, I mean, back in the day when I knew him, he would never have a car. So I just thought he stayed that way. So I can't even remember, about 40 years ago, I wrote Doug a poem. I write poetry anyway, so, and this a poem, and maybe some of you, he told me he shared it with people, so I don't know. It's called A Tribute to My Teacher. I'm so glad I sent him this all those years ago, because just since he died, I've written another one. And I'm so sad because I can't share it with him, you know. It really hurts me that I can't share it with him. So this is called A Tribute to My Teacher, and I think you can all relate with that. It goes from right away. A bushman are you, compadre, you and your strange food and the healing herbs you smoke and drink for tea. Carefully upturning rocks and rotting logs, you go on hands and knees, searching for spider webs, old coins, arrowheads, like a half-wild, wide-eyed child, finding magic where beetles live, dragonflies hover, and mushrooms grow among ferns, thimbleberries, dogwoods, and wild rose. By yourself, all alone, up dark, narrow, steep flights of well-worn stone steps, you find your way following a twisting, confusing maze of ancient cobbled streets where women still wear black, carry water, wash by hand, cover their heads, worship the dead, give the evil eye, grind their flour, bake their bread in hot coals of open fires, and avert your gaze. Old widows and witches, descendants of the illegitimate offspring of warriors, smugglers, whores, gamblers, priests, popes, gypsies, knights Templar, draped in shawls, half blind like Goya's crones, hiss, whisper, spit, read the cards and tea leaves, smoke cigarettes they roll by hand. Bearded monks ride up the road on donkeys. Barefoot children herd flocks of goats and sheep, and a group of grisly men who sit outside the cafe playing dominoes. No shame in wasting away their day. See your instrument. Recognize you as a friend, one of their kind. Greet you with a wave, pull out a chair, pour a glass of dark, thick local wine from a clay jug, wrap the table with gnarled knuckles and mangled hands, stand up, missing fingers and teeth, reverently spill a few drops on the ground for the earth, to their ancestors, and to all the exiled deities from heaven and hell. Grisly men, dirt under torn nails, not a dime to spare, in and out of the army, marriages and jail, prison time for the petty crimes of the poor, like poaching, insubordination, desertion, drunken, disorderly, living too much, too hard, misconduct. Bottoms up, they cry, in the relics of their soon-to-be lost last generation to speak it, mother tongue, while you tentatively take a sip, cough, choke, sit down, reach down, open the battered case, pull out your violin, tune the strings, tuck it comfortably under your chin, then seemingly effortlessly, eyes closed, as if in a trance, tap your feet a time or two and begin to fiddle away and sing a long goes on and on, raunchy and raucous song, then play a rocking, rowdy, free-flowing traditional dance. Bravo, bravo, they shout, laugh, clap, irreverently swear, kick the dust, sing along, then argue about who gets to take you home to drink and eat till dawn. Without ever having having been before. You, you know the paths, the trails, alleys, roads that twist and wind their way through and in and out of alpine woods, walled hilltop towns, vineyards, orange groves, fields of wheat and corn, and somehow you understand which flights of stairs to climb, which way to turn, where to step, when to stop, what's in store, how to knock, who's peeping through shuttered windows, waiting behind closed doors. Welcome you are day or night among the misfits, rejects, and ne'er-do-wells, hungry, barefoot, broke, mud between your toes, long hair, strange clothes in mythical places, sacred ground, lands, only hermits, sages, saints, soothsayers, jesters, mystics, wandering pilgrims, magicians, minstrels, mimes, and clowns know. With your felt hat and wool poncho and pack, brush, pen, pipe, pad, paints, flute, violin, and bow you go, making sketches, taking notes, pressing flowers and leaves, collecting samples of something I don't understand and can't sense and cannot see in a drawstring leather sack, carefully hidden behind the curve of your fine, long, white hands. Early morning, first light, outside under the last of the stars, ancient olive trees, and what's left of Lorca's moon, watching for your friends, the birds, sniffing the air like a fox on the hunt, alert, alive, aware, like a wolf on the prowl, listening intensely, like the first shaman in prehistoric times to shimmy down, to squeeze through the narrow, dark, damp shaft of the underworld, spark his lamp, and with pieces of ochre and charcoal, draw and bring to life woolly rhinos, fearsome mastodons, mammoths, minotaurs on the walls of the caves of Altamira and Lascaux. And like a thief on the run or an aboriginal tracker at all hours, on all fours, listening for the song you know so well, sing in so many tongues, here in the breeze, rain, rocks, snow, canyons, rivers, mountains, seas, soil and sand. And years ago, when we were young, in so many places, so many times, you tried to teach its lyrics, its rhythms, rhymes, teach the forgotten wisdom of the band, books, curses, chants, spells, dances, riddles, symbols, signs, prayers, poems, and tongues, not taught or sung in school or church to me.
Wow, that was beautiful. Thank you, Pete. John Hill, and then we'll all be eating.
Try to keep it brief. So I'm supposed to tell a joke. I met Doug in 1985, I think it was. I was teaching a class in conga drumming, and Doug was one of my students. And so we became fast friends, and we both, shortly after we left California, my wife and I were moving to New Orleans, and Doug said, well, if you're moving to New Orleans, of course you have to become friends with Arden. And I was like, kind of frightened, because he had talked so much about Arden and so reverentially that I just didn't think that I could face being with Arden or near her. And but Doug insisted, and so I kind of put it off and put it off. And then eventually Arden brought us a bouquet of cilantro, as I recall, and left it on our front porch. And that sort of broke the ice, and we became friends with Arden and Carl. And you know, we fell in love with New Orleans, and you know, Carl was Cajun, and we got to know a little bit about Cajun country. And Doug, you know, we moved back to California, and Doug, you know, by that time we had 2 children, and Doug became basically their uncle. And we both had a love of New Orleans and Louisiana culture and Cajun music and Zydeco music. But Doug and I also developed a taste for jokes that are told in Cajun country about a character named Boudreaux. And so we would regale my kids with Boudreaux jokes. And we would look them up on the internet, and every time Doug would come over for dinner quite a bit to our house, and we would tell Boudreaux jokes, and the kids loved them. And so I'm going to tell a Boudreaux joke. And I've been given license, apparently, from the Cultural Appropriation Police to actually use a Cajun accent. So Bob Morgan is here. He's Cajun. He's okay with this, right, Bob? Carl. Okay. So anyway, here goes. So Boudreaux and Thibodeau. So I should explain. Boudreaux's best friend is named Thibodeau. Happens to be Carl's mother's maiden name. Boudreaux and Thibodeau decide to go fishing one day, and they go and rent a pirogue. And they go down to the pirogue rental, and they go out on the bayou, and nothing's happening. No fish, nothing. No action whatsoever. So then they find themselves, they all day long, the sun's getting lower in the sky, and they find some corner of the bayou they've never seen before. And next thing you know, the fish are hopping into the boat, one fish after another. They can't pull them in fast enough. The pirogue is just flopping around with fish, and they're both really excited. And Thibodeau says, you know what? I'm going to make a mark on this pirogue so we can remember this place. And he takes out his knife and he carves a little notch in the pirogue. And Boudreaux looks at him for a long time. Boudreaux looks at him and he says, Thibodeau, that is the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. He says, how you know we're going to get the same pirogue next time? So anyway, Doug had a lot of, I guess I'm just going to end it there because I really can't say anything else.
Thank you, John, and thank you, everybody. This is just wonderful. So we'd like to invite everybody to have dinner and maybe to keep it somewhat organized. Why don't we, sorry everybody over here who try to be closest to the food, we're going to start over here, and why don't we kind of migrate in this direction so everybody, kind of on this side start and make your way to the buffet, and let's all enjoy a meal that Doug selected, and we're all going to really enjoy it.
We're outdoors, we're vaccinated.
Uh-oh. Looks like it.
You're below me, okay?
Good to see you. We think the seats should be on.
Oh, that's right.
Okay,
Thank
you.
We'll keep them warm for when you come back.
You and your mom, Jeff.
Oh, that's hilarious! Thank you for doing that! They got me with a whoopee cushion! Ay, 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 ay. ¿Dónde andarás? Estos ojitos que me hicieron suspirar. Ay, 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 ay. ¿Dónde estarán? Estos ojitos que no los puedo olvidar. Que vencieron su vida. Ay, 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 ay. ¿Dónde estarán estos ojitos que no los puedo olvidar? Música.
We're talking offenses, symbolism, we're talking larger concept than Olive Drive, Davis, California. We're talking life.
All right, okay. Tell me when to start.
Right now.
Wow.
This is it. There is no more. This is it.
Okay, well this is also it. Offense. See, real wood made out of precious redwood prime cut. Some further severing our neighborhood into little compartments, but such is the way that little frictions and little scraps come between neighbors. So on the one hand, it presents a nice paradise, which is virtually the walled garden of kings of Persia, Paradisian, and this is the wall to become a garden.
Ay, 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 ay.
Hey, there you are. Oh, you found me. Oh my gosh, ollie, ollie, oxen free.
Here I am.
Can I ride? I want to ride that.
Yes, yes. Classic. Classic.
Yes, yes, yes. Go, Doug.
Go, Doug, go. Light it free.
Yeah, yeah.